beginning of the story of BottleKeeper.
We went from 2,000 a month to 20 to 40 to 80 to 150, sell out a product.
Oh, wow.
We got to 8 million in sales in the third year with no employees or investors.
How impactful was the Shark Tank experience for you?
I mean, look, if you get the chance to go on Shark Tank, like, don't even think twice about it. You just do it.
What was it like afterwards?
A little bit of insider stuff. You leave there, kind of high as a kite on adrenaline. And
welcome to the Lubo Smith podcast. Today, I'm happy to welcome Adam Callinan, co-founder of the BottleKeeper, a very successful startup that he managed to scale from sales of few $1,000s to about 8 million in less than 3 years with no employees and no outside investment. We talked about his experience from Shark Tank and how it benefited to make the company scale and then exit at one point. And also his new venture, Pentane, that helps businesses to boost their profitability. So let's get to the conversation.
Adam, thank you so much for hopping on the show. And it's a pleasure to have you.
No, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to kick off with asking you about what was your way to entrepreneurship overall, because I feel like right out of the gate, we will have maybe something in common.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was typical. I wasn't that kid, at 8 running the neighborhood, kids selling rocks to strangers. Like I wasn't really wired like that. I did have a grandfather that was a very, very much like the wacky inventor that was constantly creating and coming up with things and schemes and plots and plans. So I had some exposure to that really early on that I quite enjoyed. I've always really enjoyed understanding how and why things work. Starting really at like taking apart a motorcycle and trying to figure out the way the engine works and put it back together when I was really young. But I didn't really get fully into entrepreneurship until after college, frankly. I wanted to be a doctor my whole life, and I went and got a crazy science degree, and I'm glad I did that. But I decided about halfway through college that I didn't want to go to med school anymore. So I went into an orthopedic device startup, which was my first real exposure to business.
And so I think it leads to what I wanted to tackle, right? And that is, how do you transition from actually starting to experience the entrepreneurship a little bit to actually creating something of your own? Where did it come from?
That's a good question. A lot of it, I think, probably came from the fact that I've always been comfortable with risk. I have, if I look back, and even coming out of college is a great example, I had job opportunities at big companies making lots of money that were very stable. And I mean, medical device companies that had cars and crazy compensation packages. And I chose not to do that and instead chose to go into an orthopedic device early stage company that had no income and was commission only. Like I've always been okay with risk. So as I learned how to do that, I went into this company as the only salesperson, sort of the first outside salesperson. So I got to build the company up and expanded that company into Santa Monica years later from Arizona. And so I got to run my own teams and really build from within. So I just got exposed to that world really pretty early in my professional career, really right out of college. But it really goes back to the decision to be comfortable and accepting with risk, knowing, really deeply believing that I would just figure it out.
And when it comes to figuring it out, by now, how many different roles and positions do you think that you have managed to try throughout the years?
Going through. So if we step back, looking at science and math, getting that, my degree was in molecular and cellular biology. So it was very like science, math, organic chemistry heavy. And I had a bunch of minors in the rest of that stuff just as a result of the degree. If you get that degree, if you want to go to medical school or you want to work in a lab or you want to get a PhD, But for me, I came out of college with a really deep expertise in problem solving, because that's what all those things are. Like in math, and you can take this back to just the algebra that we all took in high school, right? You know where you start and you know where you need to be, and your job is to fill the stuff in between. Organic chemistry is the exact same. Physics is the exact same. Literally, like every part of science and math revolve around that. Well, that's also the way startups are. That's the way business is. You know where you are today. You have an idea of where you want to be in 2 months, and it's your job to fill that stuff in between. And the more you do that, the better you get, and the more efficient you get at filling the stuff in between. So I went into that orthopedic company with that skill set. And then I got to apply that skill set into business, which really set me in a direction, which then later led to BottleKeeper and now Pentane, and through 3 totally different industries. But it really is the same practice across all the industries.
How much do you think your flexibility to do whatever is necessary helped you to push through all of those challenges and make things happen?
I think that my ability to be flexible is frankly a little bit of a superpower for me. Because I know, and I kind of knew this early on. I had a mentor in that orthopedic company that was something we actively talked about as being something that I was particularly strong at. There's a lot of stuff that I'm very not strong at, to be clear. but one of the things that I am good at, and it really goes back to like being just good at solving problems. It doesn't really matter what the problem is or what industry it is or where we're trying to do it. I am relatively good at being able to look at something and start where we are now and figure out how to get there. That's just something I have grown to be really quite effective at.
And at what point did you realize that it's enough for you at that orthopedic company, and that you would like to go and start something of your own? And I imagine that coming up with an idea like BottleKeeper has a story of its own also.
100%. Yeah. So if we look back over the course of that orthopedic tenure, it was about a decade. So I did that from when I was 22 or 23 until roughly 30 or 31. And we had spun off a health insurance reimbursement company that was really a technology piece in the later stages of that. And simultaneously, to be clear, there was all sorts of insanity going on inside this orthopedic company. It was like a super lead by fear, patriarchal dictator father and 2 completely nepotistic, incompetent sons. And then 2 outsiders, which were me and this guy, Matt, he was epic, that were like trying to navigate and run this thing. And it just like they were the like bad case of, if you sprinkle money on something, it makes you more of what you are. Some people, it makes you better. Some people, it makes you awful. They were the awful version of that. So it just got so ugly and so gross. And I honestly didn't really want to be a part of it. So as we spun off this technology piece, I got to see how much more efficient a business could be, because the medical device company by that time was 80 people in multiple states and delivery vehicles and warehouses. And it was just all this stuff. It was really hard to manage. It was impossible to get away from. And we spun off this health tech thing. And it was, from a revenue standpoint, it was bigger than the device company in the first 18 months. And it only had 5 people executing documents in cubicles. So it was like a super eye-opening efficiency educational experiment. And I was able to sell my piece in that health insurance tech company and leave that whole situation, which was a great thing, a very healthy, positive move to make at that time.
And so that puts us at the beginning of the story of BottleKeeper, right? When you finished one chapter, another one was just ready to start.
It was, and I like your use of chapters, because I do really very much look at life like that. I do think that a lot of what we do and how we do it should be separated into chapters. And it's not only okay that some chapters close, it's important that some chapters close and you move on to the next one. And that is a perfect example of that. I closed that chapter, and then I had time and opportunity to find a thing. And in That was in May of 2013. And in late 2012, my cousin Matt had invented this product sitting on the beach, drinking a beer out of a red Solo cup. And I've told the story a zillion times, but it's important. He's like he's not wacky inventor by any stretch, but he's like the guy that comes up with a solution to his own problem and then goes and makes it. And this is a perfect example of that. He wants to drink a Corona at a specific temperature from a bottle. That's the only kind of beer he wants to drink. So, on the beach, drinking a beer out of a red party cup and it's 80 degrees in 5 minutes is like his nightmare. So he sees people drinking out of water bottles and just has the idea, why can't I cut one of those in half and pad it and put a beer bottle inside of it? And so he did that. And I was not there for that part of it. He was at my house. We were actually traveling. My wife and I were. So he invented this product that solved his own problem. And over the course of the next 6 months, tried to get me involved in that thing. And to be very honest, I didn't think it was a thing. I didn't think it was a product people would buy. I didn't think it was a product people would buy for real money. I thought it was an interesting idea that would be a bachelor party bridesmaid gift that you would buy at Spencer's for $8. And that's not a business. I mean, it's going to cost $3 or $4 to make. Like, that's not a real company. And over months of his pushing, we were super close at then. Obviously, we're even closer now. But over months of pushing, I caved and said, "Okay, we'll do it. But I will come and do this. We'll do it together. But I want to prove that people are one, interested in it at all, that aren't just our aunts and uncles and moms and dads and brothers and sisters, because that's not relevant. To be clear, it's nice to have, completely irrelevant from a proof of concept standpoint. And then I want to further prove that people will pay real money for it. So we popped up a landing page. I did, super easy, shot a video with a GoPro like duct taped to the outside of it, looking back at your face. And we collected emails on $500 in Google ad spend. And it worked enough to be like, okay, well, I mean, people are at least interested in it, but they haven't paid for it yet. So we used crowdfunding to prove that concept out in the fall of 2013. And it worked really well. Like, people bought it. We did 300% of what our minimum it's worth doing goal was. And then suddenly we had a thing that was proven out that people would pay real money for it.
What was the moment when you realized, because as you mentioned, you were skeptical in the early days, what was the moment when you realized, okay, we actually might have something that will scale?
So I'll come back to that. I would say that I realized that we had something when honestly strangers around the country and frankly around the world, we sold into like 6 different countries, started buying the product. I mean, our crowdfunding campaign was pre-ordering the product at a slight discount to what we expected to sell it for. And we hadn't even made it yet. We hadn't even started the process of making it yet. This was it wasn't an expensive company to start. We each put in 10 grand in the total of the company. So this was just, do we get people to actually swipe their credit cards that we don't know? So that was the first wow, that's interesting. But it wasn't until the summer of 2014. So fast forward 9 months, we shipped our first orders in January of 2014. We missed Christmas by a week, which was awesome. And in the summer of 2014, Facebook launched their video advertising platform, at least to the masses. And that was the first massive inflection point where it was like, oh God, this is now like a real thing. We would fumble around at $2,000 or $3,000 a month before that. We just hadn't figured out how to market it. We hadn't figured out how to position it. It was a product that you really needed to see in action, because it's like a beer bottle and you put the top on and you screw the bottom onto it. But unless you know what it is, it just looks like a water bottle. Even if the beer bottle's sticking out an inch from the top, it just looks like a water bottle. So you had to see it moving, and that being able to make a video. I shot a video on literally propped up on the beach with hands that come in, you see it in action. And when video, went live on Facebook and their ad platform, it exploded. We went from 2,000 a month to 20 to 40 to 80 to 150 sell out a product. And we did that for the next 3 years. We got to 8 million in sales in the third year with no employees or investors. We were just reinvesting everything.
I saw that quote on your LinkedIn, and it's pretty impressive. And I was wondering if there was any thought of nomadic lifestyle, or what basically made you to decide we want to go as far as we can with no employees whatsoever.
It
What
was
was the reason behind it?
It was the prior experience. It was the medical device company that I couldn't get away from. That was a nightmare to manage. And then we had this health tech piece that generated more revenue than the 10-year-old medical device company in its first year and a half. And it had almost no overhead. It was like, that's interesting. And to be fair, like that was also in the early days of Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. And I was, the 4-Hour Work Week part is jokey and funny. And he obviously did that for clickbait headlines, which he talks about. But a lot of the methodologies behind it were certainly then solid. And so when I agreed with Matt to go and do this, that was my number one rule. Was we can go and do this. We'll go and try it and test it, but I do not want to manage anyone. We have to build it in a way that does not require employees. So that was we put blinders on from the very beginning. That was our guardrail. We're not going to cross this line. We were forced to solve problems in a way that didn't require human beings to be involved in that solution. And it scaled really well.
Did you end up changing your mind on that, or you basically had no employees all the way until the acquisition?
So the way that I look at these puzzles is that you have to start somewhere, and it's your gut instinct and your emotion that starts there. Clearly, that's an emotional, like, I want no employees is an emotional response to scar tissue and history and past. And so you go and implement that. And that worked for us really, really well. And there's a lot of reasons it worked. Part of it was luck and timing. And then there's a lot of other things that in hindsight we did well. We did a ton of stuff really bad. But there are a couple of things that we did really well that allowed that to happen. But the business got too big. I started getting data back, namely in customer service, when we got to that 8 million in revenue. I mean, and it's basically the cyclical nature of that business. We do half our revenue in the last 6 weeks of the year. So in 2016, we did probably $3.5 or $4 million in between November 20th and December 20th. Like, that's a crazy amount we were selling a product that was $30. Like, that's a lot of volume to not have a team of people. So like our customer service technology and automations, which couldn't be completely automated. We were able to automate about 95% of it, but the 5% that you can't, I was physically having to deal with. And when you're doing 100 orders a day, that's not a big deal. But when you're doing 3,000 orders a day, it's a massive deal. So I literally at the end of that year took a dry erase board and wrote all the things that I was doing on it, because we split the company in half. Matt was responsible for the back end. So our manufacturing, our inventory, like bookkeeping, finance stuff, shipping and fulfillment. I was responsible for everything on the front. So anything a consumer would see, the website, the branding, the voice, the copy, the images, the videos, customer service, email, paid media, like I did literally every single one of those roles. And I didn't outsource them. Like I literally ran every single role. So I started writing those out on a dry erase board and just started circling things that I should not be doing. And the first thing was customer service. And it's, so it wasn't that I changed my mind. It's the business. It was being bottlenecked by my guardrail. And you have to make a choice at that point. Are you going to allow that to continue to happen, or are you going to remove the bottleneck? So we did start hiring.
But I still find it extremely impressive how far you have pushed it before you did this exercise, right? Because even you mentioned at the very beginning that you basically created the first ad yourself, and that you were in charge of the copy, you were in charge of all the promotional materials, etc. And I can totally imagine how, someone hires 10 people to do that job, and then it's suddenly all over the place. So it's interesting to be getting that perspective of seeking efficiencies in terms of like going straight towards the goal that you have outlined.
Yeah. And there's a couple of really important tidbits in there. One is that because I had to learn how to run every role, by the time we did hire, I knew exactly what those people needed to do. The alternative to that is, company XYZ down the street, they go and raise $2 million on some completely unrealistic valuation. And then they go and hire all those people, but if they don't actually know how to run those roles, how do they hold the people accountable to those positions? So obviously it can be done. People do that. You hire really, really good people that know what they're doing. That's great. But that was one thing. I knew exactly when we hired our first head of customer service, I knew exactly what I needed her to do. When we hired our first head of marketing, I knew exactly what that person needed to do. The other is that because we didn't have those expenses, we got to reinvest in the business. Like, because we didn't have those 10 people on the payroll, all of that fixed. This is where companies get in really big trouble early on. Is you go and you hire all these things and suddenly you've added $80,000 a month in weight onto the business. And if you don't know how the revenue and return on ad spends and all these things have to respond to that, it's how you get in big time trouble. And you learn it the hard way when you see your P&L in 2 months and you're like, oh geez, how are we hemorrhaging money? And then you have to peel it back.
Yeah. And so when I mentioned at the very beginning that we might have actually something in common, this is pretty much what I was relating to, that for me with STRV, going through building the company from the ground up, over the years, I have also had a pleasure to try pretty much every single role that we have in the company. I always like to mention the example that I still remember that at one point I was picking the type of a carpet that we would put to the office, right? And
Perfect.
So I did recruitment myself. I did marketing myself. I managed projects, and I even did a little bit of engineering. So I think what I wanted to picture by that is that I think it gives you a great insight into the broader business if you can try all of these roles for at least a little bit. And I think that you have gone above and beyond, because you did not have majority of the other team members that I had, but also like as you are starting, I think you need to be able to pick up whatever is needed at the time versus, this is something that I enjoy doing. And I still stay very true to that I will do whatever I need to do, what is the highest priority for the business. And it's not about me liking things or not liking things, or enjoying not enjoying. I will enjoy it as long as it's the most crucial and important thing for the company.
Yeah. I mean, in the early stage, everybody wears every hat that needs to be worn. And if you're the only one there, you wear all the hats. And if there's 2 other people there, you do what you have to do to get it done. That's just bottom line. And the reality is nobody is going to be as passionate and as interested in the outcome as you are. So as you start adding people on, it doesn't mean they can't be great and good at their jobs, but nobody is going to feel that unbelievably deep sense of ownership that you have as a founder. So having you involved in those things early on is so important.
Very crucial. Very crucial. Yeah. How impactful was the Shark Tank experience for you? What are the memories from that?
Yeah, it was, what a crazy experience. It took a couple of years for us to get onto the show. We had a casting producer reach out to us in probably 2015. They saw, a Facebook video, but by that time we were spending lots of money on Facebook and hammering everybody we could with videos because they were so cheap. That was the good old days of paid media. And so we went in to that process. You mentioned earlier kind of vagabonding a bit. that whole time that we were running the company, my wife and I were traveling. I mean, we were out of the US for 4 to 6 months a year for years because we could operate the business anywhere that we had internet. So we just had to be somewhere with internet. And even Africa, like a lot of places in Africa still have internet out in the bush. So when Shark Tank happened, we made it all the way through the process, and I was in Iceland, and they gave us like the air dates or the taping dates, and they found out that I wasn't in the country and I was going to have to come back for that, and they didn't like that, so they pushed us to the next year. And then that year they had too many, it was something ridiculous, like they had too many beer companies on the show, so then they pushed us to the next year. So it just like kept getting pushed. But the difference between 2015, when we did like $1.2 million in sales, something like that, and when we actually taped in 2018, is we were like, I mean, we had done $10 million in the trailing 12 months when we taped the show. We had done $1 million in the week before we taped the show, which was lucky timing because it was right around Father's Day when we taped. But we were a totally different company at that time. So they spent, of the taping, we probably taped for 55 minutes or so. And I'd be willing to bet 50 of those 55 minutes were them just beating us up over not needing to be there. It was crazy. It was insane.
I was watching the episode, so I actually have it very fresh in my head that they were extremely surprised why you were even there.
And we knew that was going to happen. I mean, look, if you get the chance to go on Shark Tank, like, don't even think twice about it. You just do it. It's free customer, regardless of whether or not you do a deal. If you have a good episode, it'll probably air. And it's free customer acquisition forever. Like, the thing airs, it aired for us right at the beginning of December in 2018. So literally primetime holidays, it crushed. I mean, we had over $1 million in directly attributable revenue in the first week of that airing. And then it aired again in January. And then it moved to CNBC. And even now, I mean, the company got acquired in 2021, but it still airs on CNBC probably once a month, once every 2 months. It's like free acquisition forever. And it's a cool experience.
It's insane that it keeps reoccurring and it still drives some more revenue.
Yeah. I mean, it was really fun. I mean, it's crazy. The taping part was super intense. It is what you see. I mean, there's no like breaks. There are no redos. They basically just turn the cameras on and say, go. And they beat the hell out of you for 55 minutes. And in our case, by the end of it, we had gotten a good deal. We got what we asked for to get both Mark and Lori. I think it was $1 million for 5%. And there was like a royalty component to it. But yeah, the editors treated us really well because with 55 minutes of taping, they can make you into whatever they want to make you into.
True that.
They made our episode really made us look way better than we surely deserved.
And what was it like afterwards? Besides, seeing crazy sales numbers.
The process after the fact. Some little bit of insider stuff. You leave there, kind of high as a kite on adrenaline. And, we had one of those cool, like Hollywood star trailers we literally got like locked in it for the day. We had to have a psychiatrist come and talk to us to make sure we weren't like losing our minds, which was funny. I mean, I can appreciate if someone, as their business is really struggling and their dream is this and they really need this and it doesn't go the way that they want. I can appreciate why that would maybe negatively impact someone. And then Lori's husband, who is her business manager, who was amazing, like came in and talked to us and we kind of set plans to continue talking. And Mark had his business manager come in as well. And, you do a deal on TV. They know nothing about you. You know nothing about them. And they agree to give you $1 million. Like, obviously things are going to happen after that. For both sides, right? I mean, we didn't really need the money. Frankly, we didn't really want to take the money, but we did want to do deals with them to gain access to their networks. And so we moved it in that direction. Lori, who was unbelievable to deal with. I mean, she would just call me directly, which was fantastic. So we could just like actually talk about things instead of going through channels. Mark's team was slightly less of that. She wanted to put us on QVC, and that was pretty much her only what she really wanted to do. And we were a more luxury brand. Like, it didn't make sense for the brand. So we decided not to do that. And then with Mark, we didn't want to take money from him. So he agreed to do more of a consulting deal where we were just going to vest him, I think it was 2% of the company over 2 years in monthly increments that we could cancel it at any time, which was a great deal. He liked it. We liked it. But we didn't go through with it because then this gets into like US accounting detail, but we had broken our partnership election to reorganize as a S corporation the year before. And you can only break your election, I think it's every 4 years. And you can't have an LLC own an interest in an S corporation. And Mark needed his interest to be in an LLC. So we were going to have to break our S election and go back to a partnership. And it was going to trigger a huge, like $250,000 tax bill. So, I mean, it just didn't make sense. We were going to pay to have that. So it ended up not working out, but not because of we didn't want it to. It just structurally couldn't work.
Got it.
Yeah. But that happened over that was like 9 months. I mean, it took a long time to get to that point.
Well, these negotiations, it's 50 minutes to make a decision whether you want to invest $1 million, but then the aftermath is a different game. It's a different beast.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's a lot of strategy in how you do and act after taping of a show, because there's just such a long period of time. Like we filmed in June and we didn't get, the season didn't start until November, and you don't get notified that your episode is going to air until 2 or 3 weeks before the airing. So you just like are waiting. And if like they overtape the number of episodes, at least they tell you this and they hold that over your head. Like if you do something on TV and then you just screw around and like disappear, we're not going to air your episode. So there's a lot of like after the fact strategy around the whole goal being to make sure the episode gets aired. And we had Alex Rodriguez, who's a baseball player, on as a guest judge. So we rebuilt our intro to have him throwing a ball, literally just thinking that there's no way they're going to put this guy, not put him on TV throwing a ball. Like they have to have him throwing a ball on TV. So we built in some kind of risk mitigation into our episode to try to increase the likelihood that it would air, even if we didn't end up doing a deal.
And it was you inviting him to throw the ball there?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That was a very smart move.
You get to build your pitch however you want. I mean, you have a producer that is assigned to you ours was extremely helpful. But they're not telling you what to do. They're basically telling you where the limits are. Like we wanted to get all the sharks out of their chairs and like build a beach scene and have them come take their shoes off and put their toes in the sand. And we couldn't do that, not because she didn't think it was a good idea, but because it like screws up the camera angles and the lights will be all wrong. And so it's like, there are some limits, but you can literally do whatever you want to do. And again, we just figured having A-Rod throwing a baseball on TV is like, they'll use it in the promo reels, which they ended up doing. So it worked really well.
And what was the path from there to actually get the company acquired and basically close yet another chapter of yours?
A couple of years, some big mistakes, and then a couple of good wins. I mean, we did, after that Shark Tank episode, we did in 2018, we did something like a little over 13 million in revenue. And we had this amazing trajectory, continuing forward. And I violated some of my own principles around efficiency. I knew exactly the math because I built the systems. Matt and I built the systems inside the company that told us how the company was operating from a profitability standpoint. And it also informed how we built ad budgets, where our performance metrics needed to be from the ad budgets in order to drive the net margin we were going after. And I added a bunch of team members that were good to have, but not necessary. I added a fancy office that was awesome to have, but not necessary. And we got heavy and we paid the price for it. In 2019 sucked. We lost money in 2019 for the first year in the history of the company. And then I had to peel all that stuff back. I had to, we had to lay those people off. We had to get rid of the fancy office. And then COVID hit and we were now lean and efficient again. And COVID, as awful as it was for most of the world, for our business standpoint, was actually good because our fulfillment centers were not in states that were getting shut down, which was purely luck. We didn't know that. And so we were able to fulfill product through COVID, where a lot of big companies were not. And because big companies couldn't fulfill product, they weren't spending advertising dollars on Facebook and all these other places. So CPMs got really cheap. So our business did actually quite well during COVID, which is when we got acquired. We had a company come and ask, and we had a lot of companies come and ask, but never listened to it. And Matt and I were both to the point where we were ready for the next chapter. So we started taking those conversations and were able to get a couple of companies to compete with each other, which was great. And then
so it was like a gradual build-up that you were a little stubborn to take those meetings first, but the doors opened up, and then you created a bit of a bidding war.
Yeah, the business, it just got harder and harder, and I was spending more time doing stuff that I didn't like doing. Namely, we had a big patent portfolio that we had developed, which was awesome. It was a huge value point in the business, but I felt like I was spending most of my time dealing with attorneys and not actually being creative and running a company. It's just like the company had grown past that stage, and now it needed a CEO that wanted to do those things. And yeah, so we were both kind of ready for the next chapter, and we got two companies to fight with each other a little bit, which is always good for the outcome.
I feel like it could be yet another whole episode talking about how you protect your IP.
It absolutely could be. We have deep domain expertise in patent strategy and development. Yeah.
When did you realize that it's actually very important to secure the patent and to be able to work with that and mitigate that later down the road?
Matt, my partner cousin, filed what's called a provisional patent when he came up with the idea. And a provisional patent is basically your placeholder in line, in that it lasts for 12 months. And in that 12 months, you can prove out, you have your patent attorney, I am not an attorney, ... But like, if anybody listening to this is interested in intellectual property, patents, trademarks, all that stuff, you have to talk to a specific IP attorney. Do not take advice from like your cousin who's a real estate attorney. Do not go and talk to like a generalist attorney. Intellectual property is very nuanced. So you need to talk to a very specifically trained intellectual property attorney, and they'll go and search and make sure that your patent, this thing that you came up with, isn't violating someone else's patent that already exists. They'll go and find the things within your product that are patentable versus what's already in the system, which is called prior art. So they figure all that stuff out. And then you file a provisional, which gives you 12 months to prove that this thing is a thing. And in our case, that was sales. So we proved that there were sales. So in that 12 months, you have to file or convert that provisional patent into a utility patent. And the utility patent is the one that you get that you can actually then defend. But that process took us another 2 years to get. And in that time, Amazon exploded with knockoff products. And we weren't selling on Amazon intentionally. I never thought it was a good idea to be selling on a platform where we didn't own the customer. But then we had to, because there were all these like fake versions of our stuff on Amazon. And then that one patent, we were able to defend it. There's a huge strategy piece around that was horrible and unbelievably expensive, but it made the patents really defensible. We had a bunch of court orders, which we could then use to enforce the patents on Amazon and Alibaba and all these places. And then that single patent over the course of the next, let's call it 6 years, grew to 42 patents.
Oh, wow.
So we're able, which is another big strategy. Like, you get a patent, you leave it open, you do what I think it's called a continuation in process. You effectively file a continuation that allows you to amend the patent, and it issues a new patent that you can actually take off the specific components. So like, by the end of that patent, we basically owned the intellectual property around anytime you put like a container inside of another metal container. So it's it's a known strategy. We weren't the only people doing it. It's how companies like Mac Tools, like a tool company, started with one patent, and now they have 1,000 patents. It's all built around that strategy. But it worked unbelievably well. It was a huge piece of value in that acquisition. It's largely what drove the acquisition.
And I feel yet another piece that I find quite insightful on your journey is that the massive contribution of your success was within the smart use of advertising, because you mentioned especially the video ads that were the game changer. And I have a feeling that there might be the inception of Pentane and the things that you are focusing on today.
Yeah, you were absolutely correct. I didn't know when we were operating BottleKeeper that what we were doing was unique. I knew there were things that we were doing that unique, largely the no employee thing and all that stuff is not something that you see very often. But I didn't know until after. So we closed that acquisition in March of 2021. And part of it, part of the deal for the transaction was we wanted to be totally out. It was a private equity transactions. And a lot of times you hear about entrepreneurs that, they end up I say this kind of loosely, but get kind of dragged along where they still have 5% and they have to do this thing to get this earn out in 4 years from now. And I understand why, the PE firms do that. They need the person to continue to operate the business. That was a deal breaker for us. And so we were totally out by December of 2021. My role as the CEO through that year was to integrate BottleKeeper into a company that Windpoint was the name of the private equity firm they had acquired right before us, which is called Arctic Outdoors. So we integrated BottleKeeper into this, like integrating an 8-figure brand into a huge 9-figure brand. 8-figure brand has 4 employees. 9-figure brand has, I don't even know, 500 employees. It was an interesting experience. I had a pretty good idea what was going to happen, but at the end of that, I was totally done and we were totally out and it was clean and it was actually a pretty positive experience. And I got bored, spent a lot of time doing nothing, doing woodworking and building my daughter a bed and filling time, which was important. And I started consulting some companies that we had invested in, my wife and I, and realized very quickly that they had no idea how to make money. And they were not unhealthy businesses. One of them was a $20 million a year company that was profitable. So like by all typical metrics, like they were doing well. But when I looked under the hood of the business, they really didn't understand how they made money. And because they didn't understand how they made money, they couldn't figure out how to pull levers inside the business to like do this thing that positively impacts your marketing, that's going to produce more contribution margin, do this thing that's going to impact your expenses. So you need less contribution margin. And I'm using words here that I appreciate are might be intimidating to some people, but they're like where the magic is. It's like where the magic juice is. And so I built systems like we used at BottleKeeper in a much better, sexier, slimmer way. And it totally changed these companies. And it was like, it was a huge red flag. Look at that moment that this thing, what we were doing could be really helpful to other early stage operators.
I feel like people operate in patterns, and it seems like you try to distill the pattern of your success from BottleKeeper, and now you have something that you are building this product around. How would you pitch it to other people? How can you help with looking at the profitability, etc.? Let's say if I might be interested, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. So Pentane is a traditional SaaS platform. And it via API, we have a bunch of API connections, takes in the expense data from your business. So you connect your QuickBooks account, it pulls necessary expense data. And that's the most critical part of the whole system that anything else that I've ever seen is missing. Because with that expense data, we can apply math and reverse engineer profitability. We can literally take that information and say, if you want to get to break even, this is what you need to do. You need to spend $2,000 per day at a 3.2 return on ad spend to get to break even. And if you increase that $2,000 to $2,500, that 3.2 ad spend can come down to 2.7. Like we can back all of that information out of, the expenses inside your business. So the first thing it does is tells you how to build an ad budget that creates an outcome that meets your goals. Whether that is break even or a 10 or a 20% net margin, you get to set that. And then it tells you what happens if you add a discount. What happens if you're going to do a Black Friday, Cyber Monday discount, and for a week you want to offer 20% off? How does your ad spend and your ROAS need to change in order to cover that discount? So you're not just discounting into a hole. What if you want to test a price increase? How does the math change? What if you want to hire 3 new people? Add those expenses into the system and see how the math changes. So it gives you the ability to make smarter decisions because you actually have the data as to what those decisions need to produce. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does indeed. And is there a particular type of business that this is designed for? Because I assume that it likely will be a good fit for a consumer brand that heavily relies on advertising, based on our previous discussion.
Yeah. The short answer is that the math is the same for ExxonMobil as it is for a landscaping business, as it is for a consumer brand. The math is the same for every company on the planet. We are focused on consumer brands because, frankly, it's the area that I can be the most helpful. And that is my goal, is to be helpful. This is one of the ways that we can be really, really helpful. But I mean, Pentane, the company itself, will run on the system. The other part to the system is a real-time analytics dashboard that shows you, because we have all the expense data, then we pile on top of that the revenue and the advertising data. And if you have no advertising data, that just doesn't exist there. So you can see in real time what's happening in the company. Are you making money or are you losing money? Is your contribution margin increasing or decreasing? That is the answer to the question of, is it working or not? Exists in contribution margin. But you can't really impact those things if you can't track them.
Did you set out any personal goals for Pentane where you would like to take it, as it's not your first rodeo around?
Yeah, I have a really good idea of what it has the capacity to become over a number of years as a true network platform for solving the problems that I know exist in a consumer brand, because I come from that world. Which starts with financial. I mean, it's really difficult to advertise in a way that's healthy for the company if you don't understand or you can't see the underlying math. So like ad budgets are a really good example of that. Like we just make them up because, it's an expense. So we generally set them too low because it's just risk. If you don't know how it needs to perform, how is it not risk? Of course it's risk. But if you see how it needs to perform, you can get more comfortable spending in a way that's realistic. Like you can't go to your your third-party agency or marketing team and say, here's $10,000. We need to make $100,000. Like that is not a realistic outcome. So how do we use math to craft realistic outcomes? That's just the fundamental part of creating a successful business. All the other things are important, but frankly, they're a little bit ancillary if you can't just get to the point where the thing is not hemorrhaging money or not losing money.
And how do you go about hiring this time around? Are you also keeping it low?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are 3 of us involved. One is a woman named Alex, who used to work with me at BottleKeeper. She came out of an agency and came on in 2018 to BottleKeeper and ran all of our email customer acquisition channels. And she was amazing. And she continued on with Arctic for a year after I was there. And then when she left, we had a 6-month, you can't be friends clause because of non-solicitation in our purchase agreement. So she's now on, as of the beginning of this year, full-time as head of marketing, building out all of the channels. And then I have another person named Lauren, who just retired from 20 years in special operations in the military, Air Force specifically. And he has a deep expertise in problem solving, and not problem solving where you might lose money, but problem solving under real duress and challenge. So operationally speaking, he is incredible. And he came on and did an internship out of an charity organization I work with here in Montana called Big Sky Bravery. He did an internship as part of his retirement with me, just to learn how to do startup, and ended up staying on. So he's our director of operations now. So there's 3 of us.
It's very impressive how you approach business and how you do things, because it's very uncommon. And I think it brings very fresh perspective. You mentioned that you, going forward, would love to be helping people. If you look at all the 3 chapters that we have had a chance to chat about today, what would be the highlights, the 3 lessons learned that you would mention from them?
I mean, I think that the most important lesson from them, which actually goes back to the concept of chapters, is that they build on each other. In the first one was a big, heavy orthopedic thing, and I learned an incredible amount. Frankly, I learned an incredible amount about what not to do. I learned somewhat to what's right in there as well, but there was a lot of how not to treat people, how not to build a team, how not to operate a business. I got to learn all that stuff the hard way. The next chapter was a much cleaner version of that, but it was missing this piece that was important to me, and that is its impact on other people. Like going back, I wanted to be a doctor from when I was 6 years old until I was 20. And then I ended up owning a beer company, and it was fun. It was an awesome thing to do. I learned an incredible amount, and it was part of it was a chapter in my so-called book of life, but it missed that piece. So fast forward now, I get to leverage those 2 decades of experience into something that is really positive and can be really impactful to people that are early on in business and are having a hard time figuring out what to do and where to go and how to answer the questions. And that to me is what it's all about. That is the next chapter of my life, is built around helping other early stage operators, other small business operators answer questions that are difficult. So that's literally what I'm living for now, aside from my wife and kids.
I wanted to say that the whole approach to this episode with chapters was not scripted at all. And I really like how it nicely flowed together. Adam, very exciting to be talking about your story, your journey. I wanted to thank you so much for hopping on the episode, and I'll be looking forward to catching you next time.
No, I really appreciate it. Really fun.
That has been it for the chat with Adam. And I would love if you have any comments or questions, if you give us feedback in the comments down below on YouTube, or if you hit us up on other platforms as well.